And we're live with Donato Giancola. Thanks for joining us, Donato.
Oh, you're welcome. Welcome. Really glad to be here, you guys.
Glad to have you.
So I kind of interrupted you there. I had asked you about your critique method.
Oh, right. I basically I teach and critique very similarly to the way I was taught in college. Is that they're the teachers that I think I got the most out of in my education, and this was at Syracuse University a few decades ago, were those teachers who focused on critical thinking and image theory development rather than focusing on issues of composition or traditional approaches towards media. Although they certainly introduced us, many of many of the faculty there introduced us to technique, the much broader focus, and I think more importantly, the stronger focus is on the ideas of how you tell a story. What kind of choices you make in narration, what kind of choices do you make in kind of representation and symbols in art. So it really spoke to it. And actually part of this is because I was not in illustration. I was in fine arts for my training. So when I do give my own critiques, when I look at artists' work, I'm not picking apart whether they've got, the fingernails lined up on the anatomy, or whether the nose is just perfectly rendered and proportioned to the eye sockets, and your 1 point, 2 point, 3 point perspectives are right on. Those things don't really matter to me, actually. It's for me, what's more important is looking at what is the idea that the artist is trying to convey, and how well are they conveying that concept through the mediums, the issues or the mediums that they have in play.
Okay. You talked about Syracuse University. Can you tell us about how you ended up there at Syracuse, or?
Yeah, I mean, I did. It was not my first school where I started my education.
Oh.
I did start in electrical engineering, which had nothing to do with art. Yeah, so art was just purely a hobby, and I never really thought about it seriously as a career, because in a way there weren't many career paths. This is back before the internet, and back in the days of the 1980s, where basically that just commercial artists, the idea of making a living as an illustrator or even an artist in general is like there was no pathway to follow. And so and I was really good in math skills, and I loved sciences, so I enrolled in a local college to study electrical engineering. And so that didn't pan out, mostly because I got bored. I don't know, bored. I was, I think, stifled creatively in the
Right.
The teachings. Yeah, and I was actually just getting A's and B's in all my classes there, and I just felt like it wasn't connecting to me as a person. Did you have something you want to add there, Ellen? Or?
Yeah, I had the same experience going to study something after my undergrad, where I went into urban planning in Louisville, and A's and B's just like that, but total lack of passion, I guess, is what I found, which it sounds like what you kind of encountered there.
Passion, I think it was creativity, or the lack of action, like personal voice you could add what engineering was.
Right.
Right. Right. I mean, it's so rich a lot. It needs to be, right? Because you're learning these structures. There's really broad ideas of sciences, and those are kind of rigid. Gravity operates at a certain speed. Plus certain forces involved. Those aren't malleable.
Very defined things.
Yeah, right. And so that's a matter of learning to work with those properties, those structures, I should say. And so since I was still an artist, as a hobby artist, I found that, geez, this isn't what I thought it might be like. And so what's that?
You talk about never seeing art as a career or as anything more than a hobby? When you're sitting in those classes being bored or uncreative, what made you go, oh yeah, I should go to art school?
Oh, I didn't go to art. I didn't think about art that way. Class before, a kind of formal art class with any kind of high school. I didn't have any art classes then.
Oh,
So I actually I dropped out of engineering, and then I didn't know really what I wanted to do.
that sounds crazy.
Yeah,
Sounds great.
great, crazy. Yeah, it's great because I landed on my feet eventually. But my parents, I'm sure, just must have been utterly pissed and upset, disappointed, however you want to state it, and shocked. I didn't consult them because I knew exactly what they would say. Like, stick with it, finish up the degree, and then you can always try something else. But I just feel like I needed to change. So that's what happened. I dropped out of mid-semester. I didn't even wait to finish up the semester. It was in like October, late October, something like that. So literally, I dropped 3 classes mid-semester. Boom, just withdrew from them. And that was then the next semester, I signed up for my first drawing class.
Wow.
And I signed up for a history class then as well. And geez, I must have tried something else, some other kind of English classes. I can vaguely recall the other classes, but I remember the drawing class. And that's when I realized, oh, wow, I could like maybe think about maybe being an artist or maybe be an art historian. I didn't know. The class I signed up for was some medieval history, and I just loved it. And I took another one. So art was just an option that I needed to want to test out and consider.
So would you say that what were you drawing before then? What was your hobby art consisting of?
It's exactly what I'm doing right now, like fantasy art.
Yeah.
It was comics, kind of mostly drawing comic book characters, narrative scenes from my D&D adventures, and I think I remember why I never took an art class in high school, because I saw what they were doing. It's like, here, look at this nice drawing of a shoe. Like,
yeah.
who the hell wants to draw a shoe? I'd rather draw a bunch of demons, like guys in armor and a wizard casting spells and fighting demons and fighting trolls and orcs and Lord of the Rings images, and that's what I wanted to do. So that's why I never took the art class. So even in college, though, I think I was finally softened enough and willing enough to go, okay, let's try this drawing class. And and we did do that. We drew the shoes, we did the egg things, and those actually, I embraced them. I actually enthusiastically tackled them because I started to see their application and how those kind of technical issues. I think after having the engineering, little constraint put on my art, then I could go home and play in my free time on the hobby art that I love creating.
Right, with a little sharper tools.
That's right, exactly. And so that's what I started to realize, is that the classes were a way to refine my passion that I had for art. And I think that was a key factor, because even when I look at Syracuse, when I finally found my way to Syracuse University, that's also what happened there, was my hobby art really defined who I was. So I executed the classwork. I embraced it 100%. I threw myself into it. As hard as worked as one of the harder working students there, and engaged in a lot of discussion, in class discussion. But I'd almost always take what I was learning in classes and apply it to everything I was doing in my free time. Comics, meeting with a comic book club, generating my own line art for illustration in our the comic book for the comic book club, and then just making paintings that were fantasy related that I knew the teachers really didn't want to see, or have a dialogue around in the classroom. So I just I kept them out of the classroom.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah. Oh, you guys ran into the same issues with
actually,
teaching?
I'm hearing some feedback from somebody. Anyway.
Oh,
yeah, no, it's good. Okay, it's fixed. It fixed itself. No, well, actually, Bear, it sounds like you had a different experience. Bear and I went to a school that was focusing more on modern art. And I felt, as someone who knew kind of the same thing, I wanted to paint wizards and knights and art. I wanted to be an illustrator and paint book covers.
Oh,
and,
okay. So
you know, yeah, I remember the first advanced drawing class I was in. They were like, well, why don't you just step on your paper with this white paint here? It'll be fun.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
so you guys were at school together then? Yeah. Oh,
every class, just about.
And it was that kind of exploration.
It was more emphasis on that idea. So we sat through a lot of critiques where I would sit back while everyone danced around Alan's fantasy paintings, and there just wasn't a lot of interest in that or illustration at all. It was very fine art, expressive tuned, I guess you would say.
Yeah, yeah, I had similar experiences, but I actually didn't put up my fine art for or my illustration style work for what the critiques in the class.
That's what I was going to say. I've seen you show some of your college work, and some of it does, but others of it don't look like what I would expect you to have painted in college. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it is. It's all fine. It's fine. That's what I was talking about. I really embraced the thinking, the approaches, the kind of the postmodern thinking of how you're composing pictures, how you're thinking about them. And actually what I found is that it did really allow me as a professional to create a different voice for when I was finally working as a professional in the early years, because I had a more critical eye about what I wanted to communicate from the novels, what I was attempting to say when I was, first tackling the very first commissions from, like, say, Magic cards. Thinking about, wow, how can I do something different? How can I bring a different voice to this subject matter and bring a critical voice characters? And so it, even in my early part of my career, I was trying to show as diverse a character cast as I could on all my covers. So I was using atypical models, like older people, minorities, a lot of times on covers. And so I just found any way to break the typical mold of what was assumed would be on a cover for science fiction and fantasy.
I love it.
And yeah, so that I think that helped, that variation helped really gave me a different voice, and therefore allowed not allowed, but it presented the art directors with something different. And I think that's what helped really cement my early part of my career.
Yeah,
as an illustrator.
A lot of that abstraction, so whenever I went into school, I wanted to be highly technical. I actually really wanted to draw the shoe in the anatomy, and they weren't doing that. And then halfway, I struggled against it so much. And then halfway through, I think I actually read a Muddy Colors blog post about you and how you put abstraction in your work, and ended up being like, you know what? I've never tried to be positive about this experience. And so I dove in, and I was like, what if I take these ideas of abstraction and these ideas of more modern art and try and work it into my illustrations? And I think that's what really caught my stride.
Oh, it did.
Some of the best paintings of his life after that.
Oh, really? Yeah. So it worked, huh?
I love incorporating abstraction in my paintings now. I do it so often.
Oh yeah, it's my, yeah. I jokingly say half of what I do is abstract, and the foundation of what I do. Although it doesn't look that way, but it certainly has a tremendous abstract structure about how I lay out and initialize everything.
Well, you've been a teacher. I mean, you've seen, if someone's trying to be really, really technical with skin tones, it nearly always comes out looking bland, and you have to get a little crazy with it.
You do. You need to be able to have a little accent. And actually, if you're, if you try to be so technical, that means that tends to blend it. Or sounds funny. I'll use an analogy. It's like you start walking down towards the dark side if you do that. Like because it becomes ritualized. It becomes, this is the way to do it. This is and so once you start ritualizing things, you start, I think, being a conformist, and therefore you make other people, are nonconformists, and therefore you put up walls. So I instantly saw that the danger of that thinking, walking the dark path of art that way.
You work yourself into a box.
Yeah, you do. And you know what? I don't even think people, I don't think they even look at it that way. It's only when you're outside do you see the people working in a box.
Right.
Like, here's a way to paint skin tones. You use, Indian red, you've got Naples yellow, you've got like raw umber, raw sienna.
Yeah.
Right? Like, yeah, that's nice if you're like Caucasian and white and, you want the red nose on everything. Like,
and you're in perfect light.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like, we had people who were doing that in college. And at first you're like, oh, this is how I'm supposed to be painting. But then as it would progress, as I guess our years would progress and we would get more experience, it's like, no, you're doing this not wrong. You're doing this, you're being so closed in and you don't even know it. But you think you're being great because now you know all the names of the colors and where they're supposed to go on the face. Yeah,
and so that's what's weird, right? Is that you need some orthodoxy, like, going back to that engineering analogy. Is that, you need to have a baseline of how color blends, the relationship of color, and really understanding that, because otherwise you can't pull off realism, right? You can't make a dragon unless you know how to paint a bat wing and lizards and model an egg and get light and shadow, because you're making everything up on a dragon. Right. So you have to have these foundations there, but you're not beholden to them, right? You're not so ritualized that they are the reason why you're making the art. So yeah, interesting that is it's like a catch. Like, where's the balance? Where do you find the balance for that?
I don't think you can teach it.
Yeah, that's partly why I don't focus on technique when I teach.
It's what becomes interesting to me out of this is, Donato, when I met you at Spectrum, I talked to you. I said I wasn't really an illustrator. I was looking to break into studio art and the gallery world, and you really stressed the idea, the creative idea, the concepts behind it all. And I think that sticks out in this conversation and in your education. But even I've watched your Joan of Arc video, and you almost robotically name off every pigment and the mediums and how to mix them, like it's a habit for you, and it's become a habit. But it was how you described your ideas and the process of forming them that was overwhelming, really, and I think really important to the education process.
Oh, well, thanks. But in a way, that even on that DVD, if you recall, I was taking chances on some things. Like, let's try this and let's see if this is going to work. Because I did not have it so ritualized. I knew exactly how that painting was going to go.
Right.
Yeah. So there's that. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's that's that balance of, you're practicing for, I know I heard someone else mention in this kind of interesting analogy. So it's like, when you're as an artist, you're training for a battle you haven't entered into yet, right? Just like a warrior, like a swordsman will train. So it's kind of like there's a huge difference between a swordsman who's training for real combat and a swordsman who's putting on a stage play for like Hollywood films where they know exactly where the next strike is coming and they can anticipate it and make it look like it's exciting and dynamic, but there's no thrill really at the heart of what's happening. And that's kind of sometimes how I look at a lot of the atelier painting structure is that it's all about learning how to play without really learning how to really fight the battle with color or with value. Because it like that dynamic interchange that you exchange that you have as an artist as you try to conquer the technical feats that each painting brings forth to you. At least for me, that's how I look at them. Because if you look at my portfolio, I almost never copy myself. I'm always trying something new, and I love that aspect of the engagement of problem solving a new challenge on almost every single painting that I embrace.
So I'm going to step it back.
Okay. All right.
You talk about, and it sounds like you had a really good school experience, and a lot of this is deriving from how you were positive about that school experience. But what did things look like as you were coming out of art school?
Pretty bleak. I mean,
that's what yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I had no real prospects. I don't have any connections. I didn't know anybody really in the publishing field. But the one connection I should say that was kind of made or really offered is that Syracuse does have a great had a great portfolio review process where they invited other professionals and art directors to review the portfolios of graduating seniors at a kind of review session in New York City. So that was my entry into professionalism. It was my one toehold to gain the eyes and focus of some professionals that were out there. And that's what happened. So the opportunity presented itself to work with some artist representative. And that's kind of where I started my career. So, kind of going back to when I graduated, I actually didn't know I'd become a book cover illustrator. That was actually kind of low on the list of where I thought I might wind up.
Where did you think you were supposed to be 5 years after college?
When I look at my body of work, when I left Syracuse, I had kind of three pathways that I was playing with. One, and the primary one was comics, was the storytelling in comics. That's the comic book club at Syracuse was really what defined my really positive experience there. I not to say that I didn't have other positive experiences, but I mean, I loved the classrooms that we had. I loved the teachers as well. But the comic book club was where I spent almost all my free time. Hanging out with my friends that I made through that and making the comics, making new imagery. So when I graduated from Syracuse, I had this 1/3 of my portfolio was kind of comic book art. And none of it was done for classes. It was all hobby art. So that, 1/3 of what I produced, the highest, and actually some of the highest quality stuff I produced was outside of the classroom as a hobby. So I had that in my portfolio. I had a whole mess of fine art paintings, which you've mentioned you've seen there, which were kind of surreal, figurative works that I thought were somehow directed at a gallery world that I had no idea where I could actually show these and maybe sell them, because figurative realism was just not embraced. Especially back in the early 90s, it was like, forget it. And then I had the book cover artwork that I was playing with, the fantasy artwork, which I only had 2 paintings really that represented that voice, or 2 or 3 paintings in my portfolio that represented fantasy art out of all the images. And basically it was the first opportunity, the professional opportunity that opened up for me was working with this representative who handled book cover illustrators. And that's how I became a book cover illustrator. Just, I had to make money. I wasn't I didn't have, I didn't come from a wealthy family by any means. So I had to start making money at art, and the doing a few book covers were the first opportunities at doing that. And that led to a few more book covers because I kind of threw myself into them. I took it very seriously, and they were fantasy science fiction book covers. So I just loved doing them. And that then became my career.
That's kind of heartening to know that your career was like, what's next? I don't know.
It really, I mean, I'm not exaggerating. I really didn't know when I was graduating what I was going to do. Well, I knew I wanted to move to New York City, so that was it. So, but I didn't have a real path or a way to say I want to work for this company. I want to work, I want to do Dungeons and Dragons art. Actually, I still, in as much as I played D&D and role playing games, I have created almost no artwork for that genre, outside of Magic, doing a ton of Magic cards, mostly because they pay crap. So Magic didn't pay crap; they paid really well. So so basically, like I needed to make a living, and you can't make a living doing $100, full page, pictures for some gaming modules. It's just you can't survive on that.
I don't think you would be surprised how often we hear that on here.
A lot.
Every single person we've had on says that. It's like,
Yeah,
well, I had to make a living.
Yeah, right. So it's that was a huge driving force of keeping me in book covers, even when opportunities presented chances to work outside of that field. The pay was just so good relative to the other aspects of fantasy art that I just stayed with book covers.
So you're the first person we've had that I think got a representative. Is that something you would encourage for young artists coming out of school, or would it just depend on interest?
Oh, it's certain. I mean, a rep. If you get to end up with a good rep there, it's like certainly take him. A representative will have connections. Again, a good representative will have established business relationships with multiple clients. They will have knowledge about pricing. And actually, this is key, like, at least for me, with my very first commissions, as a new artist, I was literally a bottom feeder coming out of and getting my first jobs. The very first commissions were so low priced. These were book covers for Walmart, for doing books for Walmart. The fees were so low that no other artist really wanted to bother with them, that my representative was handling. So he first approached me and said, "Hey, I've got this list of covers that we need to have done. How many do you want to do?" And he had like a list of 30 covers that needed to be done. And I looked down his list, kind of drooling, because it has all these great classics that were on there. But they needed to be done in a 2-month time period. And I knew I was making samples for this representative. About one a month, I was turning in a new sample. So I figured in 2 months, I know I could do 2. So I said, hell, I can do 3. So, I'll force myself, I'll work extra hard, and I'll do 3 covers. So I took 3 commissions for the 2-month period to execute.
What were your living conditions at this time? You had just moved to New York, and you haven't gotten paid yet.
Well, yeah, I was working at the Society of Illustrators as the coat check boy there.
Nice.
So I was literally hanging the coats of other illustrators, being able to talk with that. Well, not so much talk with them. I was literally in a little tiny hole in the wall space at the Society of Illustrators, and
Michael Whalen walks in and just throws his coat at you.
Yeah, that kind of things. Yeah, and so I got to see some of these really great artists. That's also where I started meeting other younger artists, like Tim O'Brien was there. Tim O'Brien was just starting. He's an editorial illustrator, So he was really just starting his career. First
Wow.
couple years of his career, he was there exhibiting and connecting. That's where I also met Dorian Vallejo and a group of his friends as well. Jacques Brady, one of Dorian's friends. So I really got to start hanging and connecting with a young group of science fiction illustrators who were just like my same age, but a couple years just in advance.
I mean, you paid your dues, but you kind of cheated.
Cheated? Yeah. What way? Oh, you would be at the society?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I moved to New York, so I was living with two of my friends from the comic book club from Syracuse.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like comics were really a strong focus to what I did, how I identified with myself as an artist.
That's fantastic.
So, yeah, and so we were there. We'd go to the museums together. We'd go to galleries and shows. And so the three of us living together, we basically converted our living room into a studio, and we each all had our bedrooms. So we had a 3-bedroom place up near kind of the border between Harlem and the upper West Side, Columbia University. And so it was fairly cheap. You could get crack on the street for $3 if you needed it.
Cheap at the time. We were looking the other day. Those are expensive now.
When you got to knock out 3 covers.
What's that?
When you got to knock out 3 book covers in 2 months, times get desperate.
Yeah, it was. And I was working at the society at the time. So I was literally, I would work during the day and I'd come home and paint at night. I'd paint on the weekends to fill it in. And I did. I was able to, I didn't turn in any late. I met my deadlines and, impressed my rep and impressed the art director that was working on the job. And those led to more commissions. And so that was really just that all I needed was that one opportunity to really show myself, show my ability. And I took it, ran with it. And that really just started snowballing the rest of my career from there.
So when did all this change to teaching? When did you switch from student to teacher?
Oh, I didn't really switch. Just a few years in 1995 was when Vincent DeFate. So I met Vincent DeFate. He's an illustrator from the 70s and 80s, and doing a tremendous amount of book cover, science fiction book cover. So Vincent was teaching a class at SVA, School of Visual Arts here in New York City, and he was leaving. So he needed someone to replace himself at the school. And so he just recommended me. He'd gotten to know my work. I had now been painting for a couple of years at that point. And he said he recommended me to take over the class. And that was horrible.
What?
It's like, come on, I'm only a couple years out of school. I have no idea how to teach. I have no history with teaching, with interacting with younger students. And so in a way, what it is, I thought I'd just lead by example. Like, this is what I do. Here, this is how you learn. And I didn't realize students have to be motivated in many different ways. So yeah, that was a real failure. I lasted, I think, 2 years doing that, and then I had to quit teaching because I just realized it was just so frustrating, and my students, I wasn't reaching them really. So I gave up for that aspect of teaching undergraduates for about 10 years.
But you went back. You went back. Assistants and smart school.
Well, that was much, much later there, Alan. So that I think while I said I left the undergraduate teaching program, I did remain in after school, the continuing education structure of the School of Visual Arts, where I would have very small classes, maybe 3 to 5 students, and they were mature, they were more motivated, more focused, and they were, I was able to reach them more on a peer-to-peer relationship development, so that they, so I did that for like 6-7 years of continuing that class structure before finally Yeah, I think it was actually almost 10 years before I picked up the undergraduate class again at School of Visual Arts. And that was after, uh, so in those 10 years in between the time was when I started going to conventions, when I started lecturing, doing slide presentations, talking about my art, giving live demonstrations in front of small groups of people at conventions. So really what happened, Alan, was, and Bear, was that I was able to spend 10 years of time really modifying my presentation skills and interacting with various level, the general public, with fans, with other professionals, and learning what it is that they were trying to get out of my demos, my lectures, and refining all of those. So by the time I got back to undergraduate teaching, and also like this with the Smart School here and the illustration masterclass, that I had really a fine-tuned quality to an approach to what I was doing.
I heard that from Todd, which is that conventions kind of have forced him to learn to teach. But
Right.
from a personal perspective, I think that conventions they like force you to learn just as much as they force professionals to teach.
When you say force, you mean as an attendee going to them?
You can't resist it because you have to talk to your heroes, and then of course the heroes have to talk back to you, even if they're not used to it.
Yeah, so everyone learns, right? And so yeah, it's a really, that's what I love about conventions, is that they are this constantly give and take, of not, and sorry, not so much give and take, but an exchange of ideas. So you're in this fostered environment that the environment that really fosters the development of creativity, and so that's really neat. And again, if you just open yourself, allow yourself to be just a little open, you're gonna grow so much in that place.
Oh, it's true. Just going to Spectrum that one time had such an effect on me. I mean,
so that was your first time there, then, huh? So that was
my first time, and my first time being in a community of artists like that, which had a great effect, and it's a lasting effect because I keep up with almost everyone I've met there now, even you. So
wow.
It's constantly reciprocal, I think.
Yeah, it is an amazing, and again, and it's unique to science fiction and fantasy, right? You can't go to the the like the Atelier realism convention, right?
True.
It doesn't exist, right? It doesn't really.
Very true.
Yeah, and
the Portrait Society has one thing once a year.
Yeah, once a year, but everyone's there. It's not, and everyone's.
It's hard to get to.
It's they get to, and they're uptight, right? Because they're not really, the hair isn't down. They're not hanging out as they are, but not to the degree you get at a science fiction convention. I mean, it's not.
And plus, how much was Spectrum for a day pass?
Oh, right. Yeah, it's worth $40 or something. Yeah,
that's cheap for a convention. Yeah,
very affordable.
Go see whoever you want.
Yeah, it is an amazing deal, right? To do that.
So after your years, I guess, kind of being exposed to that idea of give and take, what? I don't know how to ask this question. You started evolving. I mean, you started evolving into the person now that gives incredibly insightful critiques.
Oh, that's just more. I just got better at it. I don't. And in a way, I started, especially with what, after seeing what's happened in the field, the pluralistic approaches towards illustration, the styles, how line, sometimes, right now we see a lot heavy on like a lot of line art, black and white art. So the idea of like trying to project my aesthetic of semi-photographic realism, highly color saturated art choices were not really a proper way to critique what was happening in the field of science fiction and fantasy illustration. And critiquing, I mean by like, you know, like getting other people motivated and moving forward.
But
You
you
know,
would still have those people seeking your advice.
yeah, they do. And so I learned to really modify my comments to really engage on the real critical part of what I feel people many times are missing, is that aspect of story or character integrity, character to character interaction, uh, character to environment integration, so that these things for me are really at the heart of what I love about narrative art, about image making, and why I still continue to do what I do, regardless of who's hiring me. That's like, especially now, you almost can't tell my work of like what was a commission and what was a private personal piece that I've executed. There's very little barrier between those, the thought processes between those different aspects.
I think you're so fortunate to be able to work like that. It's incredible, really, because you get a lot of people that they do their personal work, they do their gallery work, and then the other half of their life is they do their commercial work, where they produce whatever for whoever is paying.
Yeah, and that's there. That is actually how I had to start my career. Again, you're looking at me literally now 20 after beginning my career. So the first 10 years, I spent mostly just doing what my clients needed, not really developing a personal set of a separate voice, a separate body of work
Right.
to what I'm doing. So really, yeah, I mean, yeah, and so it's not a real, you're getting a very biased view of how and what I how I've evolved in what I do now. So
Well, that's okay. And now looking back, I think it was in the past year you posted on Muddy Colors those Star Wars sketches you did as a kid.
oh right,
and
yeah.
and now getting the whole pictures, it's pretty enlightening going from that, because I think we all started in the same place doing those little scratches on paper with the pencil, and then uh, now we're here.
No, it is, and that's something that I that's what I try to inspire in so many other artists, is their technical accomplishments and technical feats within each painting, but just that tapping into like why did you draw in the first place? And what story? What are you trying to convey? Because that speaks to internal motivations that will keep a person moving forward into the next piece and the next piece. So when I'm critiquing somebody of their work, or I'm trying to teach them about how to make art, I'm not trying to teach them how to problem solve this image that's in front of us. I'm thinking of where might they be 20 paintings from now, and like I'm trying to give them skills for those paintings that they will make. Because if I just go in and correct a hand and show them how to do some lighting effect, and here's a special effect thing, I'm just solving issues on that one painting for them, and I'm not giving them a real good toolkit to really carry their career forward. At least that's the way I believe in it.
So, yeah, you just answered my next question, which were, what are some of the things that like go through your head when you have a whole class of people in front of you? I mean, is that the same thing?
What do you mean? Like when I'm teaching live with, like, now I've got like 17 students at the School of Visual Arts.
Yeah, or in Smart School, like what do you? I mean, what's going through the teacher's head, the master's head, when you're looking at those things, or looking back at a group of people who all want something, and those can all be different, but you have to talk to them as one.
That is tough. You're actually the true challenge as a teacher is, what do you do with a room full of 17 different voices? Or when you're at the illustration masterclass where you've got 90. that
Right.
you have to try to reach and connect to. And
Wow.
actually, that actually is even more the reason why I focus on story. Technical. I mean, like right now, I even have students at the School of Visual Arts and online. They have different desires on, someone really wants to go in and paint the dirt under the fingernails, and another person just wants to draw a simple outline to describe the hand. So, I'd be doing them, a disservice if I just focused on one aspect of, one technical aspect of rendering and painting and media development. That's why, in a way, I think the more I've been speaking to these large crowds, the more I realize that the way I talk about composition and image development and process has been broadened and refined to be able to motivate people to make art rather than offering solutions, specific solutions.
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of sounds like it came full circle there.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. No, it's weird because I love also teaching, like when I do slow down, and I love also teaching what the technical aspect, like, like the Joan of Arc. I mean, I had a lot of fun making that video, and, going into like, okay, today we're going to paint a hand. So let's go in and like, what are we going to do when we paint a hand? And, how do we do chainmail? So here's some ideas. Here's some approaches on how to do chainmail. Like you can either, blow your brains out trying to paint every little link and every highlight and reflected light on, on chainmail, or here's a different way of looking at pattern design, and catching highlights and making a suggestion of the pattern. But see, I even now I'm getting excited about those because those do thrill me, minutia on that level, a technical.
So here's a question I really wanted to ask, because it's kind of what I'm tackling personally right now. So what would you say to someone who's kind of doing fine technically, the aspect of actually painting, but struggling to find their own passion in what it is they should be painting now that they have the voice to say it? Do you ever come?
You have a friend, Alan, who's
Oh yeah, it's a friend. A friend of a friend asked me to ask you that. If they grew up looking at artists and saying, I want to be that because it makes me feel good to see their art, and then finally being able to paint better, and then it's like, wait, what do I paint? I don't know.
I can't answer that for you. That's like, that's like for that friend. It's like I can't go inside someone's head and tell them what they should paint. It's like that's not my. I don't feel like that's my place.
Oh no, but I mean, how would you tackle instructing that person to find that thing? Because you talked about earlier, like what got you into drawing in the first place? Like, where do you go to find that?
Oh, where do you how do you tap into that?
Right.
That voice. And actually that's boy, the way you tap into that is you leave the studio. you leave the classroom, right? You find out what it is that you like to do as a person. Like I joke a lot about like, oh, I'm still that 13-year-old kid who played D&D because that's what I'm doing. But that's why I'm doing what I do, because I've been able to tap into that motivation. I've been able to sustain that desire, and not just for D&D, but when I was young, the space program, the shuttle, was really being developed, and they were first launched in when I was in high school. So I also have this passion for astronauts and the shuttle program and space exploration, and that all just speaks to the enthusiasm of being a kid again. So all those astronaut paintings you see me create are really at the core just me being that 12 and 13-year-old kid again, looking up at the night sky, watching satellites pass, literally, drift overhead, looking at the stars and wondering, how far, what's out there. So that's me. So I can't turn that on in somebody. I can't,
No.
there's, right. And so that switch is something I actually, this is an issue, like the students at the School of Visual Arts that I'm teaching now. Some of them don't know what they want to do. And, they look to me for guidance. And I think that's part where I might fail them, is that I don't have that. I don't have a voice to, substitute for their passion. I can't.
I don't think you can fail them in that situation. I mean, even from observing what you've told us here, it sounds like, and I kind of have a very similar experience, but you started out with the creative drive. It was something instinctive, but you didn't quite have the language to put out what you wanted. And then you went to art school and you got these skills, and now you had the language and you could convey that creative drive. And you already had the idea from your own personal experiences and interest. And I was similar in my undergrad experience. I had the creative drive and the ideas, but not the language and the skills yet. And now I'm just coming around to that bit.
Yeah,
but
it's weird. It's hard to, because I did spend close to 10 years just kind of in the trenches being an illustrator. And my technical development is really based on that. And I'm thankful for it, because I can't be here just whipping off new paintings about Middle Earth without having that ability of really learning so much going through illustration. So to tell people like, oh, just be yourself, just paint whatever you want, it'll come, like, that's not really how it worked for me. Like, so it's like that. That's in a way why I don't really tell people to do that.
That's another reason I think it goes full circle, because you were in this school and like you took a risk and you just kind of jumped into the unknown to go into kind of general education and then find art. And then even after art school, you were like, well, I'm just going to move to New York. And it actually seems like you found exactly what you, in retrospect, it looks like a straight line, but found what you wanted to do by just kind of letting go and being like, well, what do I want it to, just.
Taking risks. That's actually one of the things I do try to instill and talk to my students about. You just have to take a chance. Like, don't put these barriers up to feel like you have to know what you need to do. Just dive in and do it. Just dive in and make a commitment.
I think
that's what.
It would almost be a sin not to mention that the determination and effort put into it, even from your own experience, made a great difference on those risks.
Right. You couldn't have just said, I'm going to move to New York and then only paint half the day.
Oh, right. Yeah. I had to move to New York and, be motivated to paint and do all that.
I experienced a lot of, or even when we were in school, a lot of peers that wanted it and they wanted it really bad, but they didn't want to put in the effort to get it.
Yeah. To really take that go that extra distance, right?
Right.
Yeah. That's, I think I guess that's what I was willing to do. Because in a way I kind of burned my bridge with engineering.
Right.
So in a way I had to prove to my parents that I had made a good choice. So I had to do it. I had to move forward.
Knocked it out of the park. It's just the side of education that I think gets kind of pushed to the side, but the effort needs to be there.
Well,
for sure.
One thing that has come up as kind of and Bear messaged me about this the other day, that's come up as a constant theme in this podcast is that art school is just a means of which learning to kind of teach yourself that drive and determination.
It is, yeah. Actually, I have I jokingly tell my wife that I can kind of tell what an artist is going to do or whether they'll be successful just by asking them, what art are you making in your free time, in your hobby? In a way, it's it's a very obviously a very biased question because that's exactly how I found success was going through what I did as a hobby. But yeah, that the school just it's an opportunity to make a whole mess of art, to be around like-minded people. And man, if you're not making art in your free time at an art school, at art college, if you're just turning in the assignments, and there's very little chance that you're going to make it as an artist out there as a freelancer. Yeah.
That
I'm
makes me
glad
so
you said
happy. That makes me so happy to hear. So many people need to hear that. So many people go to art school and they turn in the assignments and they get a bachelor's or a grad and they're like, now what? I'm supposed to be making money, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's yeah. Well, in a way, there's a disservice too. The structure of institutions like universities and colleges are presented as a way to, yeah, they're like learn a trade, right? Doctors walk into jobs, engineers do, like business people, but even business people, it's about making the connections that happen, that also open up the doors of opportunity. So yeah, there is a bit more obviously on the shoulders of a graduating college art student, that they have to be more self-motivated.
It's true. If you're getting an accounting degree, you can't just go home and say, I'm going to draw up some accounting problems and just do these for fun today. But if you're a painter, you can go home, you can paint your dog, your coffee cup, your backyard.
Yeah, right. And you can still feel like you're a painter. Whereas, yeah, an accountant, you really got to work somewhere to be an accountant.
Right.
So, just to get it on record here, what would you say to someone who's going into art school?
Wow.
They want to be a Donato.
Well, one is find an art school where you can take classes that aren't art related. That does offer you the opportunity to kind of pursue that personal development, that a personal like of other things. I kind of gotta equate it like you need to have something to say in art. Learning art to be just regurgitating artists is that's the fine art world. You're making art for other artists, and you're kind of consuming it, spitting it back out, and it becomes very incestuous in that way. And that's kind of what the experience of a lot of modernism and postmodernism is about. It's just like this regurgitation of ideas that it just comes self-referential. And so for me, I love looking at other aspects of my life, stories. I think of being someone like a journalist would be something that would be an incredible balance to being an artist, because in a way, for me, like art is like journalism. You're reflecting back the culture around you through what you create, and so journalism would open up a lot of artists' eyes, I think, to how to find a voice and a story, something to communicate back to the audiences.
I can definitely agree with that and vouch for that, because when I was living in Louisville, on random weekends, I would go out in town with my camera and a notepad, and I would interview people and take their pictures, and it was part of the art experience for me. It was something that I not only enjoyed, but got something out of.
Oh, nice. So yeah, so in a way that's what I recommend for for people going into art school. And then the other aspect of it is it's are you living and breathing the art? What do you do in your free time? I pursued art because it was something, even during college, I was drawing incessantly. It was untrained art, but it was like, again, science fiction, D&D stuff. It was, I just couldn't stop drawing. So that's part of what you need to be, the kind of, I don't know, character you need to be in order to succeed.
I've told this story on the podcast before. I went to visit you in your studio in 2011, 2012, I forget. I was in college. We were on a trip to New York. You were kind enough to let me visit. And when I got there, you said, "Oh, so you're in art school?" I said, "Yeah." And you said, "Oh, aren't you lucky enough to have so much free time?" And that stuck with me for years. I was like, wait, this is Donato. This is a professional artist that I look up to. Of course, he's just painting all day, right? He has plenty of free time. And it wasn't until this year where I can look back at a week and see the like not as much painting as I want to get done and be like, oh, I get it. I just wanted to be painting this week.
That's right. Yeah, more free. That's what I guess. That's what I meant for free time to paint. Was that how I classified it? Or
yeah, well, I mean, free time. My free time is painting.
It is, right? And yeah, you probably got me my kids sucking up a lot of time or whatever, conventions. So like today, I barely put in 3 hours of painting time today, working on my project. So yeah, that kind of I didn't get into art to not make art. I guess that's
right.
What's happening now. So yeah, that's I don't know. That's a thing. So there's all various stages of evolving when you become an artist, and yeah. So I don't know where I'm going to go with that. So
yeah. Well, that's our hour anyway. That's our show.
Oh, are we done already? Wow.
Do you have anything you would like to say to anyone about education or going into education or anything, or you think you got it all out?
Well, one thing I guess I've hinted at, but I'd like to make sure people really hear is that when you go to a school, no matter where you go, a school being like a university setting or even like a workshop for a weekend, make sure you are a sponge. You are there to learn. You are not there to like challenge what the teacher is offering. You should be absorbing what the teacher is offering, even when it's those making abstract shapes on a board or drawing and rendering the egg with the highlights and reflected light and shadows and all that there is something to be gained from every exercise. And so be a sponge, take it in, learn. And this goes not just for art classes, but when you go into history classes, when you go to English classes, don't think how, like, I'm never going to use this again. No, like, think of how you can use this, like how this might open up other doors for you if you just embrace it enthusiastically. So that's be a sponge, and that will carry you and motivate you so much, well through many difficult periods of being in school and classes, and even as a professional. Look at, when you get a job that isn't quite the commission you wanted, figure out how you're going to learn from that, how you're going to embrace it and absorb it and benefit from that experience.
Perfect. Powerful.
All right, guys.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Barry, you want to send us out?
Oh man, Alan, you have it down so good. I can't even top it.
Like what you heard today. If you want to be on our podcast, if you want us to talk about something, have critiques, comments, you can find more about us at Hanging Out with Bear and Alan on Facebook.com. You can get at us hangingoutpodcast@gmail.com. I'm Alan Morris, alanmorrisart.com. That's Donato Giancola. Donato, where can people find you?
DonatoArt.com. That's the best place. I'm on Facebook and Instagram as well.
See, why would I want to follow that? I'm Bear Isles. Find me bearisleart.com at Bear the Painter. Thanks for hanging out. Donato, thanks so much for talking to us.
You're welcome, Bear. It's been a real pleasure. And likewise, Alan. Thanks for having me on, you guys. It's been a lot of fun. I can't believe we just blew through an hour. It's like it was like 5 minutes. Really nice. Great time.
Definitely. Thank you so much.